My phone buzzed during dinner, and that single vibration changed everything. I looked down, expecting a random notification, but instead, my screen showed one message that froze my blood cold. It said, "Run. The man next to you isn't your uncle." I looked up slowly. Sitting beside me was a man I had just met that evening. My mom introduced him as Uncle Greg, a cousin of my late father. He smiled warmly when I met him, told stories about my dad, even complimented the food like he belonged at that table. But now, reading that message, something inside me shifted. My hands trembled under the table as I stared at him. And then, he looked right at me and said, "You've grown up, Hannah." But it wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. The tone, the voice, the way my name rolled off his tongue. It was a name I hadn't heard spoken that way since I was a child, by someone who had haunted my nightmares for years. If you're hooked already, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from, because what happened next will make you question how well you really know the people sitting beside you. My name is Hannah Wells. I'm 26, and this is the story of how one dinner turned into the most terrifying night of my life. The day started completely normal. I woke up late, made coffee, and spent the morning editing photos from a wedding shoot. My mom, Laura Wells, had invited me to dinner at my aunt's house just outside Portland. It was supposed to be a small family get-together. Nothing fancy, just home-cooked food, laughter, and catching up. Aunt Margaret, my mom's older sister, had been the one organizing it. She said there'd be someone special joining, an old relative from my dad's side I barely remembered. I didn't think much of it. Family dinners were routine, something comforting after weeks of stressful work. By the time I arrived, the table was already set. The smell of roasted chicken filled the house. My cousin Daniel greeted me at the door, joking about how I was always late. The mood was warm, cozy, familiar, just what I needed. That's when I met Uncle Greg. He stood as soon as I entered, smiling politely. Mid-50s, gray hair, pressed shirt, calm voice. The kind of man who made you feel he'd seen everything and was happy to be there. My mom hugged him like an old friend, and he gave her a small, wrapped box, saying it was something that belonged to my father. She got emotional, and everyone instantly relaxed around him. But from the beginning, something about him unsettled me. He remembered things about my childhood no one else should. He said things like, "You used to sit by the window and draw for hours," and "You had a stuffed rabbit named Clover, right?" I nodded, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew my father's family had never met me often enough to know those details. My dad died when I was young, and contact with his side of the family faded. Years ago, dinner started, and the conversation flowed easily. Mom and Aunt Margaret laughed over old stories. Daniel talked about his new job, and I listened quietly, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. Uncle Greg sat right next to me, too close. His chair slightly turned toward mine. His cologne was strong, clean but sharp, almost sterile. At one point, he leaned closer and asked softly, "You still live alone in that little apartment downtown?" My fork paused midair. I hadn't mentioned where I lived. Nobody at the table had. I managed a nervous smile and said, "Yeah, it's small but cozy." He nodded, his lips curling into a faint smirk. I wanted to pull out my phone to distract myself, but I didn't want to seem rude. When I finally did, my screen lit up with that chilling message. "Run. The man next to you isn't your uncle." My chest tightened. My first thought was that it was a prank, a mistake. But before I could even react, another message appeared. "Don't let him see you read this." I slipped my phone under the table, my pulse racing so fast I could barely think. My eyes flicked up toward him, and at that exact moment, he looked back at me. His smile hadn't changed, but his eyes, something about his eyes, felt cold and wrong. Then he whispered, "You've grown up, Hannah." The words echoed in my mind like thunder. He said my name in a way that unlocked something buried deep in my memory, something I had spent years trying to forget. When I was 8 years old, I was kidnapped on my way home from school. I was missing for 3 days before the police found me in an abandoned house just outside town. The man responsible was never caught. My memories from that time were fragmented. Voices, shadows, a basement, and one sentence I'd hear over and over in the dark. "Don't cry, Hannah. I'll take care of you." And now, years later, this man sitting next to me said it exactly the same way. I looked across the table at my mom, who was still laughing with Aunt Margaret, unaware of what was happening. My throat felt dry. I tried to stay calm, tried not to draw attention, but I couldn't focus on anything else. Everything about the dinner changed. The laughter, the light, the taste of the food. It all felt like part of something sinister now. The warmth was gone. Every second that passed felt like danger was sitting right beside me, smiling like family. My mind screamed to move, to run, to do something, but fear held me still. That's when another message buzzed. My phone vibrated quietly on my lap. I risked one quick glance, the same number again. This time it said, "He knows you remember." I swallowed hard, staring at the screen. My entire world tilted. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a mistake. Someone had been watching, and someone knew the truth. I forced myself to stand up, excusing myself to the restroom. "Be right back," I said, trying to sound normal. But as I left the table, I felt his eyes following me. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and finally let the panic out in a silent breath. I stared at myself in the mirror, pale, shaking, terrified. My phone buzzed again. I hesitated before picking it up. The next message read, "He isn't who you think he is. Don't go back to that table." I leaned against the sink, heart pounding, realizing that the nightmare I thought ended years ago might have just started again. Inside the small bathroom, I could hear my pulse in my ears. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too tight. I gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady my breathing. My phone was still in my hand, the last message glowing on the screen. "He isn't who you think he is. Don't go back to that table." My mind raced through possibilities. Who was sending these texts? How did they know? And if they were right, what did this man want from me? I listened carefully. The laughter from the dining room sounded faint now, muffled through the walls. I heard my mother's voice, and then his, steady, smooth, polite. That calm tone made my skin crawl. Something deep inside me, some instinct I didn't even realize I had, told me I was in real danger. I typed a quick message back. "Who are you? What do you mean?" No response came. The silence on the other end felt heavier than the message itself. I opened my contacts, ready to call my mom, but stopped. What if he heard her phone ring? What if she said something that made him realize I knew? He was sitting right next to her. If he truly wasn't who he claimed to be, she could be in danger too. My throat felt dry. I had to get out of there. But how? The bathroom window was small, but maybe I could squeeze through. Then again, what if he noticed? What if I made it worse? I tried to think rationally, but my thoughts were tangled with fear. Then my phone buzzed again. I nearly dropped it. A new message appeared, short and sharp. "Don't speak. Don't call anyone. Walk out the back door quietly." I froze. Whoever this was, they were watching. They knew I was still inside the house. My heart hammered as I slowly peeked out of the bathroom door. From the narrow gap, I could see part of the dining room. My mom's back was to me, and Uncle Greg was still sitting at the table, calmly slicing a piece of bread, smiling, nodding at something Aunt Margaret said. He looked completely normal, but now that I was watching closely, I noticed his right hand. He wasn't eating. He was holding something small under the table. His fingers tapped rhythmically against it. A phone. He was texting. A chill ran through me. I slipped back into the bathroom, locking the door again. What if it was him texting me? Was he trying to manipulate me? To scare me into running so he could follow? Or was someone else in the house watching us both? I turned off the light and stood still, listening. I could hear footsteps in the hallway now. Soft, slow, measured. Someone was walking toward the bathroom. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then, a light knock. "Hannah?" It was my mom. "You okay in there?" I hesitated. "Yeah, just not feeling great," I managed to say, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Okay, sweetheart, take your time," she replied gently. Then her voice faded as she walked away. But behind her footsteps, I heard another pair. He was following her. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I made my move. I opened the bathroom window quietly. The cool night air brushed against my face. The window was narrow, but adrenaline made me stronger. I climbed halfway through when my phone buzzed again. I wanted to ignore it, but my instincts told me to look. The message read, "He knows. Run now." That was all I needed. I pushed myself through the window, landing awkwardly in the small flower bed below. Dirt clung to my jeans, but I didn't care. I crouched low and looked around. The yard was dimly lit by a porch light, the sound of cicadas filling the silence. My mom's car was parked in the driveway. Beyond it, a black SUV I didn't recognize sat idling on the street with its headlights off. I crept along the side of the house, keeping low. From one of the windows, I saw movement, his silhouette passing by. My stomach twisted when I saw him stop, look out the window, and glance around as if sensing something was wrong. Then his eyes shifted toward where I was hiding. I ducked behind the trash bins, covering my mouth to stay silent. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, the sound of the back door opening made me freeze again. His voice cut through the night, calm but cold. "Hannah, you shouldn't wander off alone. It's dark out here." I felt my legs shaking. He was close, maybe 10 feet away. I could hear the gravel crunch under his shoes as he stepped closer to the yard. Then my phone buzzed again. I nearly screamed at the sound. I grabbed it quickly, silencing the vibration, but not before noticing one new message flashing across the screen. "Stay where you are. I'm here." For a split second, I thought it was him again, but then I heard something. The faint sound of a car door closing from the SUV. Footsteps, fast, confident, approaching the yard. The man who had been calling himself Uncle Greg turned toward the noise, his voice changing instantly. "Who's there?" A flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing squarely on his face. "FBI, don't move!" a man shouted. I gasped quietly, watching as Uncle Greg's calm expression dropped. He took one step back, then turned to run. The agents moved fast. 2 more figures came from behind the car, shouting commands. "On the ground, now!" He tried to dart toward the fence, but within seconds, they had him pinned to the ground. I could hear the struggle, the thud of movement, the snap of cuffs. One of the agents yelled, "Suspect secured!" I stayed frozen, behind the bins, trying to process what I was seeing. The man who'd smiled at my mother, who'd asked about my childhood, who'd called me by my name, was now on the ground surrounded by agents. Then, one of them turned toward me. "Hannah Wells?" he asked gently. I nodded, barely able to breathe. "You're safe now," he said, lowering his flashlight. "We've been tracking him for months." The world around me seemed to spin. All I could whisper was, "Who is he?" The agent glanced back at the man being lifted off the ground. "Not your uncle," he said. "He's someone who's been looking for you for a long time." My knees nearly gave out. I had spent years trying to forget my abduction, convincing myself it was just a shadow of the past, but tonight proved it was never over. That was the moment I realized, sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it finds you again, right across the dinner table. The next few hours blurred together. Police cars crowded the quiet neighborhood, their red and blue lights flashing against the walls of my aunt's house. Neighbors gathered outside in confusion, whispering and pointing, while officers moved quickly, sealing off the area. I sat on the back steps of the porch, wrapped in a blanket one of them had given me, trembling even though the night air wasn't cold. My mom was inside, giving her statement. I could hear her faint voice through the open kitchen window, shaky, breaking between words. Aunt Margaret was crying quietly in the background, and I couldn't blame her. None of us understood how this man, this stranger, had slipped into our lives so easily. The agent who had found me in the yard, Special Agent Carter, sat beside me now. He was calm, professional, but his voice carried a kind of quiet empathy that helped me breathe a little easier. "You did the right thing, Hannah," he said. "You trusted your instincts. That saved your life tonight." I shook my head slowly. I didn't even know what was happening. I just ran. He looked at me, steady. "That's what you were supposed to do." I glanced toward the flashing lights at the end of the driveway. 2 agents were leading Uncle Greg, or whatever his real name was, into the back of a patrol car. His wrists were cuffed, and his expression was unreadable. He didn't struggle. He didn't shout. He just turned once, catching my eye for a brief, chilling second. Then he smiled. Small, calm, almost knowing. The kind of smile that said this isn't over. I looked away instantly, my hands gripping the blanket tighter. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. Carter exhaled. "His real name is Ryan Cale. We've been after him for a long time. He's not just some imposter, he's a wanted fugitive. Years ago, he was connected to several child abduction cases across the country. We believe he's been tracking victims who survived." My stomach twisted. "You mean people like me?" He nodded. "Exactly like you. That's why we've been monitoring you. Someone called in an anonymous tip that your name was on one of his lists." I turned to him sharply. "An anonymous tip? From who?" He hesitated, as if debating how much to say. "We're still looking into that. But whoever it was, they're the reason we found you in time." I sat there in silence, my mind racing. I thought of the texts, the messages that had warned me to run, to hide. Someone had been watching, protecting me from the shadows. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time. My mom came outside then, her face pale and streaked with tears. She sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I had no idea. He told me he was your dad's cousin. He even showed pictures, old photos of your father." I leaned into her, my voice shaking. "He must have stolen them, or made them up." Agent Carter nodded. "He's good at building identities. He's done this before, used fake documents, family histories, everything. His background checks always come up clean until we dig deeper. He finds ways into people's lives by pretending to be someone they can trust." The thought made me sick. "How long do you think he's been watching us?" Carter hesitated, then said softly, "At least a few months. We found surveillance photos in a motel room registered under one of his aliases. Pictures of your apartment, your workplace, your mom's house, even the restaurant you visited last week." My entire body went cold. I thought back to moments that suddenly made sense. The strange feeling of being watched while walking home. The times I'd heard footsteps outside my door late at night. I'd brushed them off as paranoia. I should have listened to my instincts. I looked back toward the patrol car. The officers were closing the door now, but Ryan turned his head one last time, his eyes finding mine through the window. I froze. Even through the glass, that same faint smile lingered, like he was enjoying this, like he wanted me to know he wasn't afraid. Carter must have noticed because he stood and blocked my view. "Don't give him what he wants," he said firmly. "He thrives on fear. That's how he controls people." He was right. Ryan wanted me to remember his face, to let him live rent-free in my mind. But I couldn't let that happen again. I had already lost a part of my childhood to him. I wasn't going to lose my peace now. "I want to help," I said suddenly, looking at Carter. "I don't just want to hide and forget this. I want to know everything he's done, everything he planned." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're brave, Hannah, but you should rest first. We'll keep you safe tonight. Then when you're ready, you can come in and give a full statement." I nodded, though sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dinner table again, his hand reaching for the knife, his smile, my mom laughing beside him. The ordinary things that had suddenly become terrifying. As the agents packed up their gear, my mom squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this," she whispered. I wanted to believe her, but deep down I knew something bigger was coming. Ryan wasn't just some random predator. He had planned this carefully, waited years to step back into my life. Before the agents left, Carter gave me his card. "Call me anytime, day or night," he said, "and keep your phone on. If anything seems off, you call me before you do anything else." I nodded again, clutching the card like it was a lifeline. As the police cars drove away and the night finally quieted, I stood in the doorway of my aunt's house, staring into the darkness. The house was silent now, but the stillness didn't feel safe. It felt like something unseen was still out there, waiting. For the first time in years, I understood that the past doesn't just stay buried. Sometimes, it circles back, patient, quiet, smiling across a dinner table, pretending to be family. And now that I had seen his face again, I knew my story with him wasn't over. It had only shifted from surviving to fighting back. The following morning began in silence. My mom and I hadn't slept at all. The sun crept through the blinds, cutting across the living room floor in thin golden stripes, but there was no warmth in it. Every sound, a car passing outside, the coffee maker dripping, the house settling, made me flinch. The night before still felt like a dream I couldn't wake from. The police had taken Ryan away, but my mind kept replaying his face, that calm smile, and the way he'd said my name. I didn't know what scared me more, that he had found me again, or that he'd been watching long before I realized it. Agent Carter called just after sunrise. "We're holding him for questioning," he said. "We found more than we expected." His tone carried that careful balance of authority and empathy again, the kind meant to keep victims from falling apart. But I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. 2 hours later, we were sitting in the Portland field office of the FBI. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. My mom sat beside me, clutching her purse like it was armor. Carter entered the room, carrying a brown evidence file. He placed it on the table, opened it, and spread out several photos. My stomach turned instantly. They were all of me. One photo showed me unlocking the door to my apartment at night. Another showed me sitting by the window in my living room, editing photos on my laptop. There was even one of me at a grocery store, smiling at the cashier. "These were found in a storage unit Ryan rented under a false name," Carter said quietly. "We believe he's been following you for at least a year." I stared at the photos, my pulse pounding in my ears. Why? Why me? Carter exchanged a glance with another agent across the table before saying, "Because you got away." He explained that Ryan Cale had a pattern. He targeted young girls, most between the ages of 7 and 10. Many were never found, but a few, like me, were rescued. He fixated on those who escaped him, Carter continued. He viewed them as unfinished stories. He'd wait until they were adults, then find ways to reinsert himself into their lives, usually by pretending to be someone familiar, like a friend of the family. My mom covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. I sat frozen, trying to process the idea that my childhood nightmare had grown into a years-long obsession. "You're telling me he planned this for 20 years? "Not continuously," Carter said, "but he never stopped watching. He moved state to state under different names. He always kept files, photos, notes, addresses. We think he wanted to reclaim control over those who had slipped away." He slid another photo toward me. This one wasn't of me. It was of a small room with cracked paint and a metal chair in the corner. On the wall behind it were dozens of newspaper clippings, missing person flyers, and photos of children. Some were marked with red ink, some with black. My name was there too, written on a post-it note in neat handwriting. He called it his unfinished work, Carter said grimly. "You were the centerpiece." The air left my lungs. I felt hollow, like my body was just an empty shell holding fear. "What's going to happen to him?" I asked. "He's being transferred to federal custody. He'll face charges for abduction, stalking, and identity fraud, among others," Carter replied. "We also have evidence that connects him to multiple cold cases." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're safe now," she whispered. But I didn't feel safe. Not yet. I looked up at Carter. "You said there was more. What else did you find?" He hesitated for a moment, then flipped to another page in the file. "You remember those texts you got? The ones warning you to run?" I nodded slowly. "They didn't come from us," he said. "We traced the number. It belonged to a woman named Lila Monroe. She was one of his former victims." My head snapped up. "What?" "She survived an abduction 15 years ago," he explained. "When she saw a news story about him resurfacing under a new identity, she began tracking him herself. She'd been following his movements online for months. When she recognized your photo on one of his social media accounts, your dinner post from last week, she realized you were his next target. That's when she texted you." I felt the room tilt slightly. "She saved my life." Carter nodded. "She did. Unfortunately, she didn't make it to us in time. Her body was found near a bus station last night. We think Ryan discovered she was following him." My heart shattered. A stranger had risked everything to warn me. Someone who understood exactly what it meant to be hunted by the same man. I closed my eyes, tears spilling over. She tried to stop him, I whispered. She did, Carter said softly. And because of her, we caught him. The weight of that truth crushed me. One woman had died to save another. I felt guilt, grief, and gratitude all tangled into one unbearable knot. As the hours passed, I gave my full statement, describing the dinner, the messages, everything I remembered from my childhood abduction. Each word felt like pulling glass out of an old wound. But I told it all, not for me, but for every person whose photo was on that wall in the evidence folder. When the interview ended, Carter stood. "You're strong, Hannah," he said. "And you're not alone anymore. You stopped him for good this time." That night, I lay in bed in a hotel room the Bureau had arranged for us. I couldn't sleep. The city lights glowed faintly through the curtains, and I kept seeing those photos in my mind. Me at home, unaware that someone was out there watching. I reached for my phone and opened my messages. The last one from Lila was still there. "Run. The man next to you isn't your uncle." I typed one sentence and saved it in my notes. A reminder I would keep forever. Listen to your instincts. They might be the only thing between you and danger. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. And though I couldn't thank Lila in person, I whispered her name into the darkness and promised that her warning wouldn't be in vain. Because of her courage, a monster was finally behind bars. The weeks after Ryan's arrest passed in a haze of exhaustion, interviews, and nightmares. My name appeared in news headlines for a few days. Abduction survivor confronts her captor years later. Reporters called me brave, but I didn't feel brave. I felt broken, stripped raw, like my life had been pulled apart and examined under a spotlight I never asked for. Everyone wanted the story. No one wanted the silence that came after, the long, sleepless nights, and the constant fear that he might somehow escape and come back. The FBI had relocated me temporarily to a secured apartment in another part of the city. My mother stayed with me for the first week, then reluctantly returned home after Carter assured her that Ryan was under maximum security. I still remember watching her drive away, the sound of her car fading into the distance, leaving me alone for the first time since that night. The apartment was small, but spotless. New furniture, white walls, and locks on every door. It was supposed to feel safe. It didn't. Every creak in the floorboards made my stomach twist. Every time the wind rattled the window, I jumped. Therapy became part of my daily routine. The Bureau arranged sessions with a trauma counselor named Dr. Harper, a kind woman in her 40s with a calm, steady presence. The first time I sat across from her, I barely spoke. I didn't know where to start, but over time, her voice became a rope I could hold onto while climbing out of the darkness. She helped me piece together what had happened and understand something I hadn't realized before, that surviving wasn't the same as healing. She once told me, "You didn't just survive Ryan, Hannah. You outsmarted him. You trusted the part of yourself that recognized danger when others didn't." I hadn't thought of it that way before. I had spent years blaming myself for being that scared little girl, for letting him take those 3 days of my childhood. Now I understood that fear didn't make me weak. It had kept me alive. A month later, I testified in court. The day of the trial, I wore a plain navy blouse and carried a small pendant my mom had given me, the one thing I still had from my father. Walking into that courtroom felt like walking back into the basement from my memories, except this time, I wasn't the one trapped. Ryan was. He looked different behind the glass wall, thinner, older, but when his eyes met mine, the same emptiness was there. I half expected him to smirk, to whisper something, but he didn't. He just stared, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I looked right back. The prosecutor asked me to recount everything, from my childhood abduction to the dinner. My voice shook at first, but then something inside me steadied. I realized I wasn't telling this story just for myself anymore. I was speaking for Lila, for the girls on those missing posters, for every victim who never got to escape. I ended my testimony by saying, "He tried to take my life twice, The first time, he took my freedom. The second time, he tried to take my peace. But he failed both times. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in years. That night, when the news announced that Ryan had been sentenced to life without parole, I sat by my window and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. The monster that had haunted me since I was a child was finally gone. But healing wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a process, slow, uneven, and full of unexpected moments. Some days I woke up feeling like myself again. Other days, I still checked behind the curtains before bed. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Writing helped me reclaim my story from fear. It gave me control. Eventually, I returned to my photography work. The first time I picked up my camera again, I aimed it toward the sunrise outside my apartment. The world looked different now, softer, quieter, like it was reminding me that even after the darkest night, light always finds a way in. One evening, months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a small photo. It showed the ocean at dawn, gentle waves, pink sky. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Keep living for those who couldn't." LM. I sat there holding that photo for a long time, tears filling my eyes. Somehow, I knew it was connected to Lila. Maybe she'd left it for me before she died. Maybe it was just her way of telling me she was still watching over me. Either way, I decided to frame it and keep it by my bedside. It became my reminder that strength isn't loud. It's the quiet decision to keep going. As time passed, I stopped living like a shadow of who I used to be. I reconnected with friends, visited my mom more often, and even moved into a new apartment by the river. The first night I slept there, I left the blinds open. For once, I didn't feel the need to hide from the dark. I've learned that fear doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes awareness, wisdom, protection. It teaches you to listen to your gut, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. That inner voice is never random. It's your survival speaking. And most of all, I learned that not all heroes wear badges or uniforms. Sometimes, they're the ones who warn you from afar. Sometimes, they're strangers you'll never meet, but whose courage saves your life. So if you ever find yourself in a situation that doesn't feel right, please, listen, get up. Leave. Don't wait for proof, because sometimes survival depends on the moments you trust yourself the most. My name is Hannah Wells, and this was my story, not of fear, but of taking my life back. If this story moved you or made you think twice about trusting your instincts, take a moment to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from, because awareness can save lives, and sharing stories like this one helps others find the courage to listen to their own warning signs before it's too late.